So today we're going to be painting this puppy. We're going to start out with basic shapes, and we're going to paint the field behind the puppy first, and then build up the basic shapes until we get an idea of what the shape of the puppy is. Then we're going to fill it in with the base color. That's as far as we'll get today. So we're going to start out with yellow and brown, and we're going to mix mostly yellow with a tiny little bit of brown. We've put the paints not right on top of each other in the palette, but a little bit apart so we can control that color a little bit in the middle. Same thing with the yellow and the green, put them apart on the palette and then mix them so we get this nice bright green as well. So I've got a yellow ochre color, more or less, like it's a brownie yellow. I'm going to put that at the top, starting from about 1/4 of the way down from the top of the canvas, and nice generous amount, and then again a nice generous amount of this light green, and we're going to blend those colors together while they're wet. So that's why we put a generous amount on. You'll notice sometimes I start out with going across with the color, and then sometimes diagonally across the line, just to get rid of that band between the two colors. Using a bigger brush is useful too. So then we're getting the light blue or a blue that you've got, and some white, different gradations of really light blue or white, a sort of a middle blue, and then a kind of a darker blue. Again, starting out with brushing with the color, soften the edges, and then you might want to brush across the color diagonally a little bit to help spread it and smooth, make a nice smooth gradation between the bands of colors. Next, we're going to take a bit of darker green and some of the white and blue, and we're going to make a sort of a faded color. Adding the white in will make it a bit faded and paler. We're also going to make a bluey green that's faded and a yellowy green that's faded. And these colors, just kind of making random shapes that look like they could be trees in the distance. The white gives the effect of some kind of atmosphere, and it's that effect of aerial perspective, the idea that things are more faded in the distance and they have less sharp edges and less contrast, less intense colors. Down towards the base of the trees there might be shadows, so we might use a little bit of the darker color on top of that faded color. And again, the paints and the colors are all wet at the same time. It's a generous amount of paint, so it's easy to blend it. The only way you can really blend acrylic paint is when the 2 or 3 colors that you want to blend together are wet simultaneously on the canvas at the same time, and then you've only got a short amount of time before they dry. After they dry, it's game over for that. So next we're going to go on to painting some flowers. I don't know if they're poppies, they could be wildflowers, but I just think that pink and yellow and white is going to be a nice color for some flowers. So we're starting off with the clean color when we put the color on, and then I'm not, unlike most times when I'm normally be washing the brush and wiping it, as soon as another color gets in the brush. This time I'm using that to my advantage, and I'm scratching some grass shapes in there just to give it a bit of texture. Although later on next week when we work on this painting again, we'll put more detail in there. But yeah, so the end of the paintbrush is kind of useful here, just to suggest some textures and give us a bit of structure. But as the flowers go away from us, they're also getting a little bit smaller. They're getting a little bit dirtier or less pure color as it mixes with, put too much water in it, so it runs. So and they get smaller, and you might need to swap over to a smaller brush at times to get those little flowers. What happens in the beginning here when I'm putting these flowers in, I'm doing them relatively even. I'm imagining sort of vague rows or zigzags as I move up the canvas, but the flowers get so evenly spaced that it doesn't look quite natural. So later on, I think, oh, you know what, maybe I need to come and make some clumps of colours. So clump a bunch of whites together, a bunch of yellows and a bunch of pinks. So that gives it, like here, that's giving it a bit more of a sense of what flowers actually do in the field. So don't worry that they're just splodges at the moment. It gives the impression of flowers. You could leave it that way. I kind of like it. But yeah, now we're going to add the dog. The dog is kind of drawn in a way that you're going to probably need to practice right now. So maybe pause the video in a second, maybe rewind. Starting out with a line on a piece of paper. So just practice this on some paper first. It's a 45-degree line around which is the main shape of the body of the dog. So like a kind of an oval. Now every time a dog moves or changes direction, these shapes will be different, but for this dog, this is how it works. Down the center of the nose, between the eyes, just getting the axis of the head. This line gives us also the size. So the top part of the head's fairly round, and the muzzle, I think you call it the muzzle, the snout of the dog is more like a box shape. So we'll put a square there. It's slightly at an angle, and I think maybe I might have been better off to tilt it at a bit more of a cuter angle. But you can do that with your drawing if you want. So this is the axis of the eyes, roughly where they're going to go. You can see it's not straight, it's not horizontal, it's a little bit of an angle. But yeah, I regret that in some ways I didn't exaggerate it a bit more. The pink lines are useful for giving direction and also for the size of things relative to other things. Also notice that the head of the dog is not right at the end of that other oval. It's kind of back a bit to the left, and the dog's cheek lines up with the end of that oval. Because later on we're going to draw the neck directly under there. So just a blob for where the nose is, and that front leg, it's like the line that goes all the way to the shoulder, and it's about nearly halfway down, or a third, I suppose. So this is pretty simple. It's like drawing a stick figure. You can notice what things line up with as well. So the front shoulder lines up with that left ear. The back leg is not exactly an L. It sort of sits along the bottom of the curve of the oval and goes right up to the top of the oval as well. And then that's the back leg that pokes out behind the leg. It's a pretty cute dog. So the use of these things, these simple shapes, is because we feel confident to recognize these shapes. You can look at any animal and you can fairly easily figure out what kind of shapes, if you're going to simplify the animal, what sort of shapes you could use. So if you've got a pet or something, I reckon grab a photo of it, or just sit, if you can convince it to sit still and have a go of this. It's quite fun. There's no real scientific way of saying which shape it should actually be. It's just what you think. So just try and find simple shapes. Just simplify it. The more the better. I mean, the more simple the better. So really we've just got an oval, a square, a couple of long rectangles, a few little circles, and little bit by little bit we're getting a picture of the dog. And another advantage of this method is that it's quite easy to get the proportions right and to guess the size of the head and the body and the legs to each other. Just an oval for that back sort of haunch of the dog. It's actually sort of folded up, so that's why it's not sticking out the bottom of the dog, because he's sitting folded up in his own haunches, or her. The back leg is a little bit foreshortened, which means that when something points towards you, it's not as long. Like if someone points their arm towards you, it doesn't look really long, but when they stick it out to the side, it looks long. So the tail, and then a sort of a triangular shape for where the neck is, but it sort of disappears behind the square of the snout. Now this is only like a really basic idea of, it's like a map of the drawing of the dog. It's not the actual drawing itself. But if you practice this on a piece of paper, it's going to give you an idea of how you can approach painting it on your canvas. So I reckon you should maybe just grab a piece of paper, and you might want to rewind this and pause it at some stages, but definitely have a crack at drawing this. If you've got your own pet and you think, I want to paint my own puppy or cat or ferret or whatever, then you could apply this method to that, or you could send me a picture and I'll try to help you out with that too. So there we've got the map, and we're going to start to put in the details. We don't need too many details, but so I've started out with the 2 circles for the eyes, and then I've drawn this almond shape around there, or a leaf shape, and you'll notice that it points inwards. There's a slight angle. The outside corner is higher than the inside corner. The nose is basically it's almost like a square with a round bottom, and then 2 little tadpole shapes up in there for the nostrils, and then like a big W that comes up, or like a mustache shape, the smile of the dog. Isn't that a great thing? Okay, and then the ear. So there's a bit more that doesn't fit in the shape, and it's a nice swoopy shape on the top and a pointy bit at the end, and there's a kind of fold in the middle. So what we're doing now is we really look at the dog or the photo that we've got, and we follow the contour as much as we can, but we use the map that we've drawn as a guide of where everything's going to go. So you'll notice the front leg, it scoops in a little bit from that line. It doesn't follow it too much, and sometimes I go away from the blue line, and sometimes I cut back into it. So then you'd really want to be looking at your photo or your actual dog or whatever. So without all the guidelines, then we've got a dog outline. So when we come to paint it, starting out with the main shape in a circle, an oval in pretty much the size that you want, it's easy to place it in the right space. Just make sure you leave enough space for the tail. Be aware that the head is pretty much directly over the second half of the oval, not at the end of the oval, and that the head's at a nice kind of a tilt too. So I'm just drawing the shapes without drawing the lines this time, because we've got the idea of the sizes. So you might want to rewind a bit and pause step by step as you paint it on. Drawing the muzzle or the snout a little bit narrow, so I make it a bit wider. Then start to do exactly the same process, adding in the black lines, trying to make the eyes a little bit bigger in my version, trying to make the head slightly bigger and the belly a bit fatter, just to make him a bit cuter. Made the ears a bit bigger as well, so a bit more floppy. Exaggerated the paws a touch because it's more puppy-like and a little bit more fluffy. So you can use your own artistic license in what you're trying to get across. The next step is really just colouring it in. I'd like to go for a light medium tone, not too dark, not too light. It's just a good background colour, and it sets you up for next time, so that'll be next week. I hope you've enjoyed this stage, the first part of the puppy field painting. If you need materials, you can get in touch with Art Piece Projects. Info at artpieceprojects.com. You can get a Create Joy art pack delivered, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks for joining us.